we got to talk about Vancouver again. I know we've been talking about Vancouver all year long, but it's a gift that keeps on giving. And Jim Rutherford, whether he was in Carolina, whether he was in Pittsburgh, and now, of course, in Vancouver, he is the manager who is the gift that keeps on giving. We ask people to be honest. We love them when they are, and that is why Jim Rutherford is a friend to media everywhere. So a couple of the quotes in the Globe and Mail with Gary Mason sort of lead us all to believe here, Greg. If you've read the piece, and again, I'll direct you to Sekeres and Price to hear the interview with Gary, where he talks about sitting down with Jim Rutherford. It sounds very much to me like this is the chumming of the waters for at least one trade and maybe two. Your thoughts on the Mason piece in the Globe?
Jim Rutherford is wonderful for this. Jim Rutherford is wonderful for going to a newspaper. And by the way, I was able to read it. I don't know if you know this, but before the paywall comes up, if you quickly do a cut and paste or a copy and paste, you can get the whole article. It's a little journalism trick for you. Little journalism trick for you.
Little journalist trick there. Okay, very good.
Yeah, a little journalism trick for you. Especially if your browser is bad like mine,
Yeah.
and it's loads slowly, you can get away with it even better. So to say there's not a good solution that would keep this group together as I take the Werther's out of my butterscotch tin, is as much candor as you could possibly imagine from Jim Rutherford or any executive. Yeah. And like you said, the most intriguing part about this is that the Canucks had been doing everything they could to nod at the problem, but not explicitly discuss the problem.
Yep.
You believe, though, Marek, that this is putting their business out on Maine to try to say that the solution's coming. Let's put our offers on the table. One, I can't imagine that hasn't already been happening behind the scenes. And two, does it matter in the case of the guy they're most likely going to trade, JT Miller, who can control where he was going to be playing next?
So there's a couple of things here, and I want to get to my thoughts on what's next now, specifically for JT Miller and for Elias Pettersson. But bracket that for 1 second. So I think this is, like I said off the top, this is preparing the marketplace for a trade. But most specifically, when you hear Rutherford talk, or you read him in this piece rather, he's preparing the marketplace for them to lose a trade. Like when you're reading how Jim Rutherford is talking about this, it's like, you know what, we're going to move a 1C. We're not going to get a 1C back. Maybe we can use these assets to do something else down the road and picks and blah, 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 blah. So it's not even just preparing the marketplace like, okay, crash landing coming here. It's be prepared if what comes back is pretty disappointing. And listen, we all understand, and from day one, we've all been able to understand it publicly. Privately, managers have known about this for a while. These are two distressed assets. And you look at the seasons that they're having right now, and you may say, well, that's just indicative of, this relationship that's gone
They're distressing each other. Yeah.
Yeah, right? So, but I look at it and I say, so this is a manager here who's preparing the marketplace to lose a trade. Now, the other thing that I keep coming back to on this one, there's two other things I want to get to. They keep adding up in my head. It wasn't that long ago that JT Miller looked at assembled media and right at the camera and said, "There's no problem. Do you want Petey to come out right now?" And
he's lying.
But here's the thing. Okay, pause.
He was lying, obviously.
Yes, of course he was. And Elias Pettersson essentially did the same thing with the big eye roll. Okay, yeah. But now, here's the thing. By Rutherford doing this, what are those two going to get asked the next time there's a microphone and camera in their face? This is what your general manager said about your relationship. What is your comment? Essentially, it's going to be, are you lying now or were you lying then? And I understand the idea of these guys, in the middle of the season, doing what hockey players always do, and that's protect the hive, even if that means lying for their team. Managers do it all the time. Coaches do it all the time. Players do it all the time. The thing is, this is all wide open and in front of everybody's face.
Yeah.
So I feel, honestly, the next time these two are confronted by cameras and microphones, it's going to be spicy.
You were going to say I feel. Were you about to say I feel bad for them?
No, I don't. Well, hang on a second. I do feel bad for them in one sense, and I'm glad you asked me that. I think I've mentioned this to you before. Now, Gary Mason's interview, I just finished it before coming on the show, and it's really good. Again, Sekeres and Price, I encourage you to go and watch it. There is one thing that I do take issue with with where Mason lays blame for this situation, where he talks about, it's essentially the players' fault. This is because of these two guys. They can't get along and they're blowing this team up. And I've maintained, we've talked about this before, I don't know that we can lay blame on both and say this is completely the players and they just need to get along and grow up and be men until we know what the issue is. There are some things you cannot come back from. There are some issues. Like I think the analogy I used with you a while ago is you can't expect the lamb to meet the lion halfway. That's not the way these things work. So until we understand and know what the actual issue is, I'm unprepared to say these two guys just need to grow up
but
put whatever differences they have, because there's some things you can't put behind you. You can't.
You're talking around it. Because the way that you're talking would indicate that you believe there is probably one party more responsible for this than the other, and I believe the same thing. And it's probably the same person we both are thinking about, which is JT Miller.
Yeah,
that JT Miller has a reputation for being a prick of the locker room. That he's been accused of being a bully to Pettersson. Like it all adds
Brad
up
Richardson said as much. We've had teammates say as much. We had Bruce Boudreau say as much. Like, this is not news.
This is not news. Exactly. So the idea that both would be culpable, that, like you said, that there be any sort of inference of just bury the hatchet, boys.
No.
Some things you just can't come back from. You know what this reminds me of? I was talking to Seth Jarvis today at Carolina practice.
Okay.
Because when Mikko Rantanen walked into the room for the first time to see as a Hurricane, they had video of it. And everybody's just saying, hey, what's up? What's up? Hey, the Finlands were all doing their secret handshake and stuff, whatever. So but when Seth Jarvis met him, he walked up and shook his hand and said, hi, I'm Seth. And I'm like, wow, hold on a second. This is just like when somebody gets hired at your company. Like, there are some people that may know him from the industry. They met him at a trade convention or something. But for the most part, most of these people have no idea who this man is. They know him from his highlights, but they've never met the man. And it reminded me of the fact that these teams inherently are just companies. They're just workplaces. And have you ever had out there in Marek podcast and Videoland, had a coworker or a classmate that you just could not get on with, that the hatchet could never be buried, that because of an incident or behavior or just their existence, you couldn't be in the same place, to the point where every day you come to work and you think, my God, I hate this place because of that person. That could be the existence of Elias Pettersson with the Vancouver Canucks. So I completely empathize with him. I'm not saying it's a complete one-way street. I'm sure they're both culpable in some ways, one more than the other. But the thing about Rutherford here that I find very interesting, Jeff, is that as much as those guys are going to have to answer the question, Rick Tocchet's going to have to really answer the question. Because Rick Tocchet, more than anyone else, downplayed the idea that this was poison in his locker room. And there hasn't been a real investigation as to what his role in this should be to try to maintain the peace, what he has done to maintain the peace. I think there are more questions I'd like to see asked of the coach in this situation than either of those two players, who will simply say, hey, it happens. There's an issue. We play on. We're a band of brothers. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Talk to Tocchet about it.
The other person in all of this, too, is the captain, Quinn Hughes. Oh, I do want to say one more thing. Here's another thing about the Vancouver Canucks. The Vancouver Canucks knew about this relationship, or the lack of a relationship, or the cloud over this relationship, before they signed both.
They did. Right? I mean, Bruce Boudreau talked about it. When he got there, it was like there was an issue.
Everybody knew it, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, and then they made the decision, we're taking Miller and not Horvat, and that cost them the captain. They knew about this. This is no surprise. So, let's not let anyone there off the hook. They knew about it, and they said, we're still signing these guys to big ticket long-term deals here. I do wonder about Quinn Hughes. When it came to the Vancouver Canucks, because I do wonder if there's going to be two trades here. For the longest time, I really do, because I wonder, because I don't even think, I'm speculating on this. This is not based on any inside information or whispers, but I do wonder, when you have a situation this big, Greg, this isn't just Rutherford, this isn't just Alvin, this is jumped from inside the room to amongst the media to the fans, and now you even have, like semi-retired sports reporters coming out of semi-retirement here to do interviews and blow the whole thing up on a Tuesday afternoon. Like this thing has exploded past, okay, it's in the hive and that's it. So I don't think
today's article did have a real Bob McKenzie reappearing on
coming
July
back,
1st
yes,
to break the biggest trade energy, didn't it?
Tomas Hertl is going to Vegas. There is that Tomas Hertl to Vegas vibe about this one with Gary today, and good on him for getting. But none of this, I think so much of this is I don't want to say instructed by, but I think like the conversations go right up to ownership. What do you want to happen here? Because this isn't just about these players and the team. This is about the Vancouver Canucks brand. Like, this is a brand issue too. So I don't think that this is just a little sort of, this is just a contained fire, Mr. Aquilini. It'll never get up to your offices. Well, guess what? It is.
Well, and that's the biggest thing about the Rutherford thing. This quote rocked me when I read this. We've had those conversations, and I think the parties understand that, and I think they've tried, meaning they tried to like resolve the situation. Sometimes emotions get deep, and as much as people try, sometimes you can't get over it. And it certainly appears that's what's going on here. Like you said, priming the marketplace for there to be a move, maybe even two, and then you make a good point. I don't believe that the locker room has banded together against JT Miller. There are probably people there that they're like looking at Elias Pettersson saying, "What the hell are you doing, man? This is a 100-point center who's amongst one of the better two-way centers in the game. He's going to go to like Colorado and help them win a cup or some such, like there's probably a faction in the locker rooms like, why can't you resolve this
here? Okay.
Because it's breaking up a good thing.
That's gotten us to a really interesting point. That's gotten us to a really interesting place, which is, and this is where, in a situation like this, we've seen rooms divided before, right? You remember Montreal's centennial year where it was Camp Koivu versus Camp Kovalev?
Oh,
right?
yeah, for sure.
Like this is what happens sometimes. And if you trade one, right, what happens to the loyalists of that? Like, let's say you trade JT Miller. What happens to all the JT Miller loyalists, if there are any, in that dressing room?
And that should
what
be the trade
what
too,
happens then?
Potentially. Yeah.
That's why I wonder if, and this comes from above Rutherford. I do wonder if Aquilini steps in and has said or says both. We can't have this. We can't have this anymore.
You mentioned like you got priming the market for there not to be a good return. I think
Rutherford
that's
said
the
it.
Miller. But
Rutherford
hold on,
said it.
I think that's the Miller trade. That's not the Pettersson trade. Like you have to get some semblance of great return for Elias Pettersson because you can move him anywhere other than unlike Miller. Obviously he's a younger player. He's got a higher ceiling than Miller. I think you are. I made the joke when Carolina made the Rantanen trade that like the trade market for JT Miller is now the Rangers, and that might be accurate. I don't know. Maybe he's got other options on his plate, but whatever it is, the market is extremely small compared to the market for Elias Pettersson. And so I think you have to nail the Pettersson trade, even if maybe you take a loss on the Miller trade.
If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.